Before diving into this story, comment below where you're watching from. I love seeing our community from all around the world. She stood quietly in the corner of the luxurious restaurant, a black African maid in her crisp uniform, unnoticed by most. To the billionaire's wife, she was nothing more than help, someone to mock, to belittle, to laugh at in front of others. But what the wife didn't know was that this maid carried more strength, more dignity, and more intelligence than her cruel words could ever touch. And when the moment came, her reply had spoken in a language the wife thought no one around her understood, left the entire restaurant frozen in shock. What did she say? And why did it change everything? The evening was staged in perfection. A glittering chandelier cast golden light over polished silverware. Couples whispered at velvet tables, and laughter spilled through the air like champagne. At the center of it all sat the billionaire and his elegant wife, known not just for their wealth, but also for their arrogance. Nearby, the maid moved gracefully between tables, her dark skin and neat uniform a sharp contrast against the room's extravagance. She had been trained to keep her head down, her voice soft, her presence almost invisible. To her, service was not shame, it was survival. Each plate she carried was another day of food for her family back home. But to the billionaire's wife, she was a target, a subject of whispers, smirks, and comments loud enough to sting. She spoke about the maid's appearance, mocked her accent, even laughed at the way she walked, all while other guests pretended not to notice. The maid lowered her eyes, pretending silence meant dignity. Yet deep within something burned. She had endured humiliation before, but tonight was different. Tonight the cruelty was sharper, crueler, louder. And soon the whole room would hear her voice, in a way no one expected. The mocking grew bold. The billionaire's wife leaned back in her chair, speaking just loud enough to ensure the room heard her comments. "Look at her," she scoffed. "She thinks she belongs in a place like this. The way she carries herself, laughable. I wonder if she even understands us." The maid's hands tightened around the silver tray she held. She had learned to endure. She had swallowed her pride so many times that her silence had become armor. But something in her heart shifted as the wife's laughter echoed across marble floors. A waiter brushed past, whispering, "Ignore her, just keep working." But the maid couldn't. She had spent years hearing such voices, voices that stripped her humanity, voices that tried to remind her she was less. But she was not less. She was simply unseen. When the wife dropped a napkin deliberately on the ground, demanding she pick it up properly, the maid knelt. Gasps flickered around the room, but not for the act itself. It was the words that followed. Because when the wife mocked her again, the maid finally answered back, in flawless French, a language the billionaire's wife had boasted about mastering, though few had ever heard her truly speak it. The maid's voice was clear, steady, and piercing. She spoke not with anger, but with elegance, her words flowing like poetry. She told the wife in perfect French that respect is not bought with money, nor demanded with cruelty. Respect is lived, earned, and shared. The billionaire's wife froze, her face drained of color. Whispers filled the air. People leaned in closer. The arrogance melted from her face as she realized. The maid not only understood, as she had spoken, with more grace than she could ever muster. The restaurant's air grew heavy, a silence no one dared break. And in that silence, power shifted. Every pair of eyes in the restaurant turned toward the billionaire's wife. She had mocked, sneered, humiliated, but now, her own pride was crumbling in front of strangers and peers. The maid stood tall, no longer shrinking into shadows. Her voice, calm yet commanding, carried dignity that silenced the clinking of glasses and the scraping of forks. The billionaire shifted uncomfortably, unable to defend his wife without making himself look smaller. And the wife? She was speechless. Her lips parted, but no words came. She had been exposed, not by anger, not by shouting, but by the quiet power of a woman she thought beneath her. Gasps turned to applause. Not loud, not mocking, but gentle, respectful. People nodded at the maid, acknowledging her strength. And in that moment, the entire restaurant learned a lesson they would never forget. Cruelty can be dressed in diamonds, but dignity shines brighter than gold. The maid returned to her duties as if nothing had happened, her face calm, her posture proud. She didn't need thanks. She didn't need validation. She knew who she was, and she had reminded the world too. The billionaire's wife left early, her head lowered, for once, without the confidence of superiority. The whispers followed her out the door, but they no longer celebrated her. They celebrated the maid, and long after the meal ended, the story spread of the African maid who silenced a room full of privilege with nothing but her voice. Because this story isn't just about one woman in one restaurant. It's about every person who has ever been belittled, mocked, or made invisible. It's about every worker whose humanity has been dismissed because of the color of her skin. The takeaway is simple. Dignity has no uniform. Respect has no price tag. And arrogance always crumbles in the face of truth. So, I ask you, how many more times must the world be reminded before it finally listens?